There's one topic in Hilchos Chéivin, even though we finished all the shiurim in Hilchos Chéivin, there's one topic in Hilchos Chéivin which I realized that I did not give a shiur on. It's not in Shulchan Aruch Hilchos Chéivin, and I realized that after we did the tour that I never spoke about how often you have to check the Eirov and when you could rely on the chazakah that the Eirov is fine. Now when we talk about the chiyuv of checking an Eirov, it's obviously to remember that the concept is discussed in halacha that the Eirov was ruined. It's discussed in Shulchan Aruch. It's not talking about that the walls were ruined. It's talking about that the food was ruined. That's what the word Eirov refers to, the joint food. What we're going to be talking about over here is when the mechitzas get ruined, and what's the obligation of checking the mechitzas? How often do you have to check the mechitzas? When there's an Eirov that's done in a private property, that means you have a yard, a bungalow colony, or whatever it is, and there's gates around it. It's easy to know when something breaks. Shaila is when you have an obligation to check it. But more importantly, if an Eirov is done in the city in any way, shape, or form, there is Shaila when there is an obligation. When is there an obligation to check it? When is it good to check it? And who is trusted to check the Eirov? The minhag today is in every place that the Eirov is checked before Shabbos. Every week the Eirov is checked. Almost every Eirov is somebody who's in charge of checking the Eirov before Shabbos. The first source that discusses this clearly, and which is the source that's found, and everybody quotes it, is the Shalos Tshuvas Hara Carmel from Rav Eliyahu Margolius. He's Av Bezdin of Bilgurai in Poland. His lived in the time of Noda B'Yehuda, and his Tshuvas Neirachayim Siman Yudches. He is discussing a very common shaila of what happens when the string of the Tzuras HaPesach ripped on Shabbos. And it goes into a whole discussion. What could you do? Can you continue carrying? Can you not continue carrying? Is it something which we say Kevon Shehutra Hutra? And he brings out the heter, a certain heter that you could continue carrying in certain scenarios. He discusses the specific Eirov. But towards the end, there's a big paragraph in the beginning, which is about a page and a half long, and then there's another two small paragraphs. The end of the big paragraph, which is the main question of the tshuva, which I'm not going to get into the whole discussion of Kevon Shehutra Hutra, it's something with the topic which we already discussed before. He concludes by saying, "Veroi b'chol ir," that every city should have lahamid al zeh talmid chacham echad shnayim. There's a talmid chacham or two. Sheyelchu b'chol erev Shabbos kodim achnas Shabbos. You go right before Shabbos every Friday. Lefakeach al iskei Eiruvim b'chol inyanim, to check the Eirov and all the topics of it. V'gam al yidei kach yideim nifsak b'Shabbos kodim Shabbos. Then you'll be able to decide if you see that the Eirov ripped on Shabbos, you'll know that it happened before Shabbos, and then you never had an Eirov to begin with, or it happened on Shabbos. And then, if you checked it before Shabbos, and it was fine right before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos you found that it's fine, ואם בוודאי נפסק בשבס, יכולים להכריז התר ותיימי בצידוי, כמו שכוסו הפויסקים בכל שאלס חוכם, שפעמים אסרו, פעמים מתירים. He says you have to check it. The reason why you check it every Erev Shabbos, samuch, his lashon is to check it. Yelchu b'chol Erev Shabbos, koydem achnasas Shabbos. You check it close to the end. Shabbos enters. This is the first mocker that everybody who discusses the responsibility of checking an Eirov uses as a raya that you have to check the Eirov every Friday before Shabbos. The question begins, you have a big city, there's no way to check, one person to be able to check the whole Eirov every Friday before Shabbos. And the other issue you have is, let's say you have a 3-day Yom Tov, a Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, then you're not going to check the Eirov from Wednesday. Even if it's Erev, You can check it on Wednesday, it's out of Yom Tov. When do you have to check it, and could you rely on it? So a lot of places that they check already on Thursday. And the question is, does that solve the issue? And the real question is, what is the chiyuv of checking? When is there a chiyuv to check an Erev? So this harakarma, like I told you, is the mokher everybody brings. If you look in Yesoida Yeshurun for Rav Felder, was a Rav in Toronto, he wrote a series in Hilchos Shabbos, Yesoida Yeshurun Chelik Hey, page 341, he brings this Maramakim, and then he also points out the tshuva of the Doivev Meisharim, was a Chabin Rav, Chelik Beis Simen Chavches. And I'm going to discuss the difference between the two. The Doivev Meisharim, Chelik Beis Simen Chavches, is a tshuva from Tafshin Zayin. He was already in Yerushalayim then, and he wrote a tshuva to a Rav in Tel Aviv who had an Eruv. The Rav in Tel Aviv told him that he has an Eruv, and he appointed a mashgiach who checks the Eruv every week. But being that it's a big Eruv, talking about Tel Aviv in the 40s, and it was still already then a big Eruv, today it's even much bigger, and it's impossible to have it all checked on Erev Shabbos. So he checks it on Thursdays. Parts of it are checked on Thursdays, and they rely on it without checking it again on Fridays. Now, just as a point to point out, if you look at a simple reading of the Shas Tshuvas Harakarmel, that he says Roi, it's a good thing to have Talmid Chacham Echad or Ishnayim, one or two. So it means you have to have a big enough team to check the whole Erev on Erev Shabbos right before Shabbos. But here the Doivev Meisharim is discussing a case as one mashgiach, he does the whole Erev and he needs time, so he starts on Thursday, does whatever he does on Thursday, and comes Friday. The problem was his Rav was starting to worry if he's doing the right thing or not, because some of the lechis that were being used for this Eruv were in public places, and there was some weekends that there was a lot of walking on those streets on Fridays, and came Friday night or Shabbos morning, and they would see that some of the lechis were knocked down, some of the tzorus of Pesachs were not in the proper place, and it became a shaila. Did it happen before Shabbos? Is he doing something wrong by checking it a day before, rather than checking it right before Shabbos? And the Chabin Rav there begins by explaining that there is a svara to say there is a chiyuv to check an Erev every Friday, mamish samach l'Shabbos. Why? Because it's shchiach, the way he's describing it, the Rav is a davar shchiach, and it's miut hamatzui, that it gets ruined. Without going into discussion what's miut hamatzui, you could go anywhere from 0.5% to 49%, but that's different, not connected to this discussion. But he says the miut hamatzui, that it gets ruined, and it's shchiach. Therefore, the fact that you have a cheskas kashrus gets cancelled by the fact that it's shchiach and there is a miut hamatzui, that it gets ruined. So therefore, miut hamatzui is also considered shchiach. Miut she'ein hamatzui is not shchiach. If it's roiv, it becomes a shaila of chazak asura, a bigger problem. So it's miut hamatzui, and either miut hamatzui is shchiach, something common that it could happen, or that it's common enough that it happens, and therefore l'chayra, it's a chazaka. Yes, it has a cheskas kashrus. It's a chazaka asuya l'ishtanis, because yes, it got checked on Thursday. It's chazaka asuya l'ishtanis. Therefore, there should be a chiyuv dika. What's the raya for it? Two places in Shulchan Aruch, not in Hilchos Chéivin, where this concept is discussed. First place is in Hilchos Mikvos, in Siman Reish Aleph, in Yeridei Asif Samachei. Over there it discusses that a mikveh, the lashon of the mechaber is that it's muchzak leismayit, that it has a chazaka that it drops below 40 sa, and the woman went and toiveled in there without checking if there's 40 sa or not. And then afterwards, later, a day later, it was checked and it was found to be that it does have 40 sa, but it wasn't checked before the tefillah. She has to toivel again. Why? Or chayshesh, it being it's muchzak leismayit, So therefore, maybe there was no 40 saw when she toiveled over there. And therefore, she has to toivel again. The tefillah was not... It's muchzok. There's a chazaka that it goes lismait. We'll get to soon exactly what the issue with that is. It's not a roiv, it's a chazaka. Roiv is different than chazaka. And the shach right away points out to you over there, even though right now it has more than 40 sa'ah, but being that it's muchzak li is chaser, so we have a worry that there was chaser at the time of tevilah. Happens to be that the Yesoida Yeshurun uses this hilchis mikvos as a raya to the Hara Carmel. Says probably that's the reason why the Hara Carmel said that you have to check every Friday. Another raya is, if you look at hilchis tzitzis, the Magen Avraham says, why do we check the tzitzis? We check the tzitzis before making a brach. Why do we check the tzitzis? Because maybe it's going to rip. Right? No, it doesn't rip every day. But it's a mute that is going to rip. It's not a chazaka that every tzitzis is going to rip, but it's a mute. There's a mute that's going to rip. So these two are proof that when you have a mute which is going to get ruined, so you can't rely on it without doing the checkup before. So based on that, the David Meshorim, the Chabiner says, it might have been, this would be a raya that you have to, that not that it's good to check, but it's an obligation to check every Friday the Eruv. Now, the mocker of the Mechaber for this in Hilchas Mikvos is a tshuva of the Ran. And the tshuva of the Ran says that the reason why you're chayshish is because not only do you have a chazaka over here, that it's mismaet, you have another problem. You have a chazaka of this woman being a tameh. You have cheskas tumah also. So you want to use something to take out cheskas tumah of a woman, you have to have a cheskas kashrus. And if you have something which is a chazaka, it's also lismait, you have a cheskas tumah against it, you have a problem. So the Chabiner says that Eruv is not the same, that she's tameh. You want to take her out of cheskas tumah, otherwise why would she go to mikveh? She went to mikveh because she's tameh, she didn't go to mikveh for fun. So you have a cheskas tumah. So the Chabiner says you have a Eruv is different than the shail of a mikveh. By a Eruv, first of all, you don't have the darkei leismayat like by a mikveh. It's not, you don't have a chazaka that it's going to get, that it's going to rip, that it's going to get destroyed. You have a chashash. You don't have a cheskas tumah against it. You don't have a opposite chazaka that's pulling you in the other direction. So therefore, you can't compare it to mikveh. You can't compare it to tzitzis, because by tzitzis, the chazaka of mute, that it gets ripped, it's a mute which is done by maisa, by an action. That something happens, and that's why it gets ripped. Over here, the chazaka, you don't have that issue that you choishish, that there's a maisa of people doing it. So obviously, just as a side note, if you're in a place where there's a chazaka of vandalism to the Eruv, you do have a chazaka of a maisa against it, like by tzitzis, but we're going to get to the maisa, what to deal with it now. But right now, the Chabiner says, therefore...
Where's the maisa? Nobody does a maisa to the tzitzis.
Yeah, but things happen. It doesn't rip by itself. A Eruv, the only way it can fall is going to fall by itself.
I thought it was because people squish.
People squish and they push the poles, and the poles get knocked over. It says the mute in the tzitzis is a problem of mute that's done through maisa. Over here you don't have, that's what Chabiner says. And therefore he says, therefore he says that it's not the way he presents it, it says by Eruv it's not the same mute as a mute of a maisa. By Eruv all you have is a suffix. And once you have a suffix and you don't have a chazaka that is going to get ruined, and you don't have a maisa that is going to get ruined, and you don't have a chazaka against it, it makes it a problem. Therefore, you have the cheskas kashrus that's in place. And all you have is a suffix, maybe when you're going to see, when do you have a problem? Only if on Shabbos you saw it ripped. And then you have a shaila, if it ripped before Shabbos or ripped after Shabbos started. Up until then, you have a cheskas kashrus.
But the Eruv, you said you can't rip from a woman because you have a cheskas.
Tumah against it, yeah.
The Eruv is before the Eruv was built.
But now, Erev Shabbos, if you're not checking the Erev, what chazaka you have for sure that you're not allowed to carry. Only the first week you have a chazaka against it. All the other weeks you're fine. Only the first week you have a chazaka against it. And what's the raya? If it's a suffix by a Erev, you don't have to worry about it. Because in Siman Shin Samachei, in Hilchas Eirovin, something which is oimedli saser, if you have a wall which is planned to be knocked over on Shabbos, so therefore then you can't rely on it. But if it's only suffix, if it's going to be taken down on Shabbos, then you could rely on it until it's actually taken down. So therefore we see that when it comes to suffix, when it comes to mechitzis, the Shebina says you don't have, you could rely, you could be mekel in such a suffix. Therefore, Shin Samach Hey. In the middle of the siman. So until you have a situation that it's ripped, and the chazaka was isra cheskasi, the chazaka got ruined, you rely on the chazaka that is kosher, and therefore the fact that you check it on Thursday, it's enough. You don't have to worry about it because it has a chazaka. You just confirm the cheskas kashrus. When you're going to see it on Shabbos, it's going to be a suffix, but it's already only if it rips, it's going to be isra cheskasi. Until then, you can rely on the chazaka. He still says toiv mehiyois toiv and bevadai nachoin that there should be checked samuch l'Shabbos kodesh. Why? Because even though we have a chazaka that it's kosher, we know that the chazaka, efshar levader, we don't rely on the chazaka. Which is why, if you look also the same halacha in Hilchas Mikvos, the same seif over there, where it says that a mikvah shedar kol ismayit, you have to do tefillah again. But if it's a mikvah she'ein dar kol ismayit, you don't have to do tefillah again. And the Mechaber concludes that mikol mokim kosher hadavar la'ayin koydem tevilim yesh b'memsa. It's good to check before to make sure there's memsa, and the Shach over there points out why, because it's klal, even though you have a chazaka, we don't rely on the chazaka, it's b'mokim she'efshar l'izbarer. So therefore, he says it's a good thing to have it checked right before Shabbos, the Eruv, because even though you have a chazaka, still no, b'mokim she'efshar l'izbarer, it's good to check it, but it's not a chiyuv, according to David Hashem, it's not a chiyuv on a regular Eruv to go and check it. And he says, and if you're going to go and check it right before Shabbos, your cheskas kashrus is a stronger cheskas kashrus of the Eruv. Because yes, you have a cheskas kashrus on Thursday, but on Friday you have a much stronger cheskas kashrus. So if you look at the David Mishalim's position, it's good to check. It's not an obligation to check. Why? Because it's not common that it gets ruined, and there's no chazaka that it gets ruined. It's not even a mute amotzi that it gets ruined. And therefore there's no obligation, but it's a good idea to have it. Which means that if you didn't check it, you forgot to check it, or somebody was not able to check it, it's fine. What happens in places where you don't have that chazaka? For example, so now what's the reason why you would say, when is there a chiyuv based on this? According to the Har HaKarmel, it's more of a chiyuv to do it in Erev Shabbos. Still not, he still says it's roi, he doesn't say it's a chiyuv. But when do you have, based on both of them svaras, whether you're going to take the Har HaKarmel's position, that's roi, the way that Shebinin understands it, that it's only mitzad, it's better too, but the chazak is still there. Or you're going to take it the way that you say, the Yeshurun takes the position that it's, according to the Har HaKarmel, it's a little bit more of a stronger chiyuv. There are certain scenarios where you have to, where the chazaka is ruined. And that is, for example, if your Eruv is relying on fences, which were put up for construction. So you're never going to know when the fences are going to be taken down. If your Eruv is relying on electricity lines, usually electricity lines stay in certain places of the country. In other places, they're slowly moving all the overhead wires the underground, and they're not sending a notice to the Rabbanim, and it's 20 miles down, we're going to be taking down electricity lines. You find out about it after it happens. They do it. The local people on the street know about it. The other people don't know about it. So, if you're in an area where there is construction and you have tzuras HaPesachs with strings, you also have to check it. Why? Because you have tall trucks that come through, and the tzuras HaPesach the string is gone before that. So if it's a situation where there's construction happening on that block, or you're relying on certain fences that are going to be removed, or it's in a place in a city where they are slowly changing the overground wires to underground wires, and you relied on it, so you have a chiyuv to check. Even according to the Devav Mesharim, your chazakeh is ruined for those sections. Obviously, if you're relying on a wall, on a chayma around the city, you don't have to worry about it, because you do what I'm saying. The chazakah is there. It's better to check, but it's not the same as Yerushalayim, as a chayma that's been there for many years, many years. A gate, if you're relying on a gate around the place, and you see it's a gate which is maintained, you don't have to worry about, you have the chazakah. If it's a gate that you see that it's falling apart, and you see that they already replaced one part, you don't know when they're going to replace the other part, you still have to rely on it. If there is a storm, a snowstorm, or a windstorm, and in certain places, whenever there's a wind or a rainstorm or a snowstorm, they lose electricity, and the reason they lose electricity is not because that the electricity company decided to shut down electricity, it's because a tree fell on it and knocked over the wire. So you have to, again, after a storm, you have to check everything. It becomes a chiyuv to check it. It's not only mehayois toiv or roi, you lost your chazakah. At certain scenarios, you lost your chazakah. Just like by a mikveh, when do you have to check for a leak? If there's an earthquake, you have to check for a leak. Why? Because you ruined your chazakah. Up until then, you have a cheskes kashus. It has a mikveh, it's a cheskes kashus. The Eruv is the same thing. The question, what's an afkamina if it's mehayois toiv or it's a chiyuv? If you forget to check it. If there's a snowstorm, and a heavy snowstorm, and you did not check it before Shabbos, you have a problem, because your chazakah was ruined, and you can't rely on the chazakah, because last time there was a snowstorm, you checked it, and you had to fix 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, or 20 places. Or you had to fix the Eruv in a certain way to jump to a wall, at least to fix it temporarily until they fix electricity lines. But if not, you have a problem. You don't have the chazakah anymore. If you have the chazakah and you forgot to check, you could rely on it. Yeah, so that's the first part of the shir. When is there a chiyuv chazakah? When is a chiyuv bdika? When you have a chazakah. So that's why the minhag is to check it every Friday. Sometimes it's mehayois toiv, and sometimes it's mamash a chiyuv. And if you want to take, like I said, you want to take the Seder Yeshurun's view regarding the shitta of the harakarmel, it becomes a chiyuv every. It becomes almost a chiyuv every Friday. Now, if you're in a place, like I said before, where you have vandalism against the Eruv, you also have to check it. You also have to check it every Friday, Samach l'Shabbos. The question is, will it help? Because they know that you're checking it Samach l'Shabbos, and they'll come rip it afterwards. But you still have to check it to make sure that it's fine. Who is trusted to check the Eruv? We know the klal that is learned in Hilchos Maseches Git, which was learned this year in Yeshivas, and right in the beginning, that Eid Echad is Neman Beisurim. And Rashi over the right explains right away that Eid Echad Neman Beisurim, if there was no Ischazek Isura. If there was Ischazek Isura of Eishasish, you need two Eidim. Discuss the idea we need two Eidim by a get. If you look in Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Shchita, in the first siman, Yeridei Siman Aleph, if Kuntres Achren Tes Vav, Siman Aleph, Kuntres Achren Tes Vav. I discussed it last year, the whole idea of ונאמנות over there. And over there, the Alter Rebbe explains this idea that Eid Echad is Neman only when Lo Yischazek Isura. He explains why as Eid Echad Neman by Shchita, doch is Yischazek Isura, and by Nikur. the animal is not edible, you can't eat it before it's geschachten. It says because of biyodi l'sakna, if you have the power to correct the problem, then then even by chazik asura, eid echad is ne'eman, which means that eid echad is trusted to say something is aser. Eid echad is trusted to say something is kosher if it was not a chazik asura. And even if it was a chazik asura, eid echad is ne'eman to say that it's kosher if it's biyodoi l'saknei. What does biyodoi l'saknei mean? It's something that he himself could fix it and make sure that it's done properly. When you have a shoichet, he is able to shecht animals, he's able to biyodoi l'saknei. If you have a boidik, he's able to be menaker to take the chaylev out of the animal. He's biyodoi l'saknei. Therefore, he is ne'eman. If a person is not biyodoi l'saknei, but he's able to tell other people l'saknei, people that will listen to him, how to be masakin it, even though from Alter Rebbe medayik that maybe it doesn't work, but the mice, we do follow that it could work, and that's why we rely on the chsherim, even though the Rav Machsher is not the one who's there, and we rely on Hagolah that's done in factories, even though the Mashgiach is not the one that's pouring the hot water, but the machine is doing it, and he's just supervising on it. Because if somebody's trusted that he could say how it should be fixed, then it's considered biyodoi l'saknei, and he is trusted. Now, who writes it? Who's what?
Even if you can't fix it yourself, but you could make sure it gets fixed.
Minig Yisrael. Minig Yisrael. No, that's how they explain biyodoi l'saknei. Otherwise, you don't have. What does it mean? Otherwise, otherwise you have no ne'eman. Who are you relying on? Now, we're going to get to how this applies to Eruv. Let's continue first with the rest of the ne'emanos. A woman is a woman ne'eman. So now, if you have an eid echad that's checking the Eruv, the chayda should be fine. Why? Either it's lo chazik asura, maybe it's a derabanan. By derabanan means chazik asura is ne'eman. We're going to get to it in a second. Is a woman ne'eman to check an Eruv? Shaila was asked recently. Now we know a woman is ne'eman to be mashgiach on the restaurant. That's a tshuva from Reb Moshe, and a woman is ne'eman for a lot of other things. A woman is ne'eman even in isurim deiraisa, even in ischazak isura, if she is able biyodoi l'saken. That's why a woman who's a nida is ne'eman to say that she went to mikveh and she's kosher. Why? Because biyodoi l'saken. It's a yisur deiraisa, and it's ischazak isura, and she's still ne'eman. And she doesn't have to bring edus. And that Alter Rebbe discusses it in Hilchos Pesach in Siman Taf Lamed Zayin Seif Vav. That's why a woman is also ne'eman for shchita and for nikur. Same reason. It's biyodoi l'saken, even though it's ischazak isura. If ein biyodoi l'saken, she's not able to actually fix it, but it's something which is only asur midrabanan, she's also ne'eman. A woman is also ne'eman, because by ischazak isura, when is that? Well, if it's not a ischazak isura and it's a deiraisa, a woman is not ne'eman. Yeah, but if it's a ischazak isura and it's a deiraisa and it's biyodoi l'sakna, she is ne'eman like nida. If it's midrabanan and ain't biyodoi l'sakna, she's also ne'eman, which is why a woman and a katan and an eved are all ne'eman to say ad kan tchum Shabbos, which you're going to see in Siman Tov Tzadik Tes and Shin Tzadik Tes in Hilchos Tchumen. A woman is also ne'eman to say in the Isur Deiraisa if it's Milsa Davida Legluye, even if it's a Schazak Isura. For example, if a man dies and the only person who saw the man die is a woman, and now the only way to be matter the woman to get remarried is based on this Eidos Isha, it's an Even Ezer Siman Yud Zayin, she is trusted. And that is discussed in Alter Rebbe in same Kuntres Achron that I mentioned before, Kuntres Achron Tezvav. Alter Rebbe also discusses it in Chasedus, in Seif Chafei. It's an example of this certain scenarios where a woman is trusted. Yeah, but based on that, Alter Rebbe says in Choshen Mishpat in Hilchos Eidos, Seif Chafei, that if it's Milsa David Legluye, even if it's Chazik Yisura, a woman is Nama. Now, if it's a lot of work to fix it, Tircha Yisera to get it fixed, Efshel L'Saken, so then a woman is only trusted if it's a Derabanan, not a Deraisa. Therefore, by Bdikas Chametz, before the Zman, a woman is trusted. It's in Taflamet Beis if Yud. And if it's after the Zman and there was no Bitul, and now the Chiyuv Bdika is a Chiyuv Bdika Mideraisa, because it's Biur, she's no longer Neman. That's in Taflamet Zayin Sifov. Why is that? Because it's a big Tairach, big Tirche. So it looks like when there's a big Tirche, even if Biyadei L'Sakno, we don't rely on a woman.
Only if it's Chazik Yisura.
It's Chazik Yisura. Because a lot of tircha you do. So then the Alter Rebbe discusses that in Hilchos Shchita, in the first Kuntres Achron in Hilchos Shchita, where the Alter Rebbe says, why by Nikur is a woman trusted? It's tircha, you say, it's a lot of tircha. So he says, because by Nikur, if it's something which is Vada Yisur, even by tircha Yisera, a woman is trusted. If it's something which is Sofek Yisur, she's not trusted. She's not going to do a good job on the tircha Yisera. So therefore, by Bdikas Chametz after this man, being that it's not a Vada Yisur, she doesn't think she's going to find anything. So tircha Yisera, she's not going to do a good job. She's not trusted. But by Nikur, there's a Vada Yisur. Even though it's a Chazik Yisura and a tircha Yisera, she's trusted. Huh?
Without the right.
First Kuntres Achron Aleph, Siman Aleph and Yeridei. So when it comes to Ne'emanos, if you have Eid Echad is Ne'eman if there's no Chazik Yisura, even if it's Ein B'yadei L'Saknei. He is, if there is a Chazik Yisura, he's only Ne'eman if B'yadei L'Saknei. If Ein B'yadei L'Saknei, you need to aid him. A woman, if it's Avidah L'Gluye, she's Ne'eman, even by Deraisa. If it's Derabanan, she's also Ne'eman. If it's Biyadei L'Saknai, without any Teirach by Deraisa, without Teirach Gadol by Deraisa, she's trusted. If it's Teirach Gadol and it's Vada Yisur, she's also trusted. Only if it's Teirach Gadol and a Deraisa, and it's not a Vada Yisur, that she's going to find it's by her it's a Safek, then she's not trusted. That is the dinim of Ne'emanus. So how does this apply to an Eruv? Now, you can't make one rule for an Eruv. How are you going to where are you going to place the Eruv in this question? Is this Chazik Yisura? Is it not a Chazik Yisura? Is it Deraisa? Is it Derabanan? Is it Milsa David L'Gluye? Is it not Milsa David L'Gluye? Where does it fall into? The answer is all of the above. Depends. Which part are you looking at? If you're talking about a place where Mideraisa, you're Mutter L'Taltel. Only Miderabanan, you have to fix the walls or whatever it is. Then you're talking about a Miderabanan, right? So even if it's a Chazik Yisura, but it's only Miderabanan, a woman should be trusted. For sure, Eid Echad is trusted. If it becomes a Shalat Mideraisa, you're not allowed to carry, and you're only talking about building an Eruv, that means there is this Chazik Yisura, and now you want to take it out of this Chazik Yisura. You want to ask, could you rely on a man that built an Eruv? So it's B'yadei L'Saknei. Obviously, he built it, right? So it's B'yadei L'Saknei. This Chazik Yisura was also to carry. Now it's Deraisa, because it's Rosh Hashanah, and there's Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and you had to fix it. It's Nama. What happens if you're only checking it? If you're only checking it, there's no Chazik Yisura. It's very important to tell the difference between the Chazik Yisura and there's no Cheskas Kashrus, yeah? A city without an Eruv that has a Shus Rabim is also to carry. A city that has an Eruv and no storms or anything happened has a Cheskas Kashrus. And you have in the middle, when a storm happened, so the Cheskas Kashrus was Isra Cheskas Kashrus, but you still don't have a Cheskas Isra. So then the question becomes, what are you relying on it or not? So if you're going to say that it's biyodei l'sakna, is, like we say by kashrus, l'maisa, that the fact that you could tell somebody to fix it, you're only appointed by a Rav, and to tell the Rav this has to be fixed, and he's going to make sure it's fixed, it's biyodei l'sakna, then whether it's a deraisa or derabanan, it works. And we don't say it's terach gadol, because the terach gadol is only to actually fix it. The woman is not going, or the mashgiach is not going to be the one actually fixing it. Sometimes, if it's the right, a lot of times we send the mashgiach who also has a truck, so you could fix it right away. But if after you send the woman one Friday to check it, she's not going to be the one going up with the truck and fixing it. So she is trusted. Now, most of the time, it's also avidu l'gluye. Most of the time, the borders of the Eruv are avidu l'gluye. If you see, we're talking about, you have the lines that people know until where the Eruv is, and where the problems are going to be. Nobody's going to see. If you're talking about seawalls, there's anyways no if you're going to rely on it, then you have, which is another issue, which most Eiruvin today try not to rely b'chlal on seawalls. Every Eruv that's today, almost every Eruv tries to avoid b'chlal relying on seawalls. Find the walls that are parallel to the sea, inland, so they could rely on those walls. But because it could shift, the water could go up, the water could go down. You don't want to just rely on. If you need to, you rely on it. But you try to have backups. I told you, Allah in certain scenarios are able to. Yeah, certain scenarios are able to. So if you're going to check it, and the issue is that, and the issue is, if it's a milsa v'ligloye, so a woman is trusted, even by the deraisa. If it's biyodei l'sakna by taking somebody to fix it, it's also neman. If it's chazak isura, by lois chazak isura. A woman is not neman by deraisa by lois chazak isura unless it's biyodei l'sakna. And bichlal, it comes to, you have to see which place we're talking about. If we're talking about a deraisa or a derabanan, if it's avidu l'gloy or not avidu l'gloy, if it's biyodei l'sakna, not biyodei l'sakna. You could use. What is this? But it's biyodei l'sakna. He's the one who just built it. It's biyodei l'sakna for sure. So you could rely on him. Why not? 1 second. The guy built the Eruv, right? You're trusting the guy who built it. It's not biyodei l'saken, it's biyodei he actually did it. It's more than l'saken. It's biyodei mamish. He made the Eruv. It's the same as a sheichet. Sheichet shechted the animal. So you trust him, right? Otherwise he's not going to eat the meat. So here also you do it. Now, this concept of eschazak esura, or not eschazak, whether you do rely on the woman, you don't rely on the woman, you can rely on the woman only in certain scenarios, also applies to a mikveh. If you have a mikveh, and the mikveh is being supervised by, the mikveh is kosher already, so you don't have any shilas, it has a cheskas kashrus, you just want to check. A woman is obviously, no Rav checks the mikveh every night before the woman. There was certain places where the Rav would check the mikveh every night before Shkia. There's a place, and I think I mentioned it. I see there's nobody here from, there's one person here from 3 years ago. There was a Rav who would check every night. He would put a coin by the ashaka. So that way, if the coin was gone, he knew that the water, because it would drop every day. So he had to check it. So he would put a coin every morning. If the coin was gone, he knew that the ashaka was overflowed. If the coin was not gone, he knew he had a problem. But you don't have to check the mikveh. But what about filling up the mikveh? Filling up the mikveh, you don't have a cheskas kashrus yet. How do you fill up the mikveh? You have to wait for rainwater to come in. So, it's a shayla. Could a woman be trusted? Yeah. However, it's better to have a man not to get into shaylas. If you look, there's a kovetz chaf of Shishim Shana that came out 20 years ago, I think. Yeah, 21 years ago, by now. And over there they have a bunch of letters in the Rebbe Rashab. One of the letters that was printed over there, I think it's the 5th or 6th letter, was a letter to the Rav of Fulda in Germany. I think the Rav's name was Michael Akayin. There the Rebbe Rashab discusses the mikveh in town over there, and the filling up of a mikveh. And he says you have to have a mashgiach that's going to supervise the mikveh. And he says use the same mashgiach that you use for the butcher store. And toiv shia ish v'lo isha. Puts in parentheses. It's better it should be a man, not a woman, by a mikveh. So we're talking about Erev. It's also toiv shia ish v'lo isha. But if you're talking about checking an Erev a regular week, you don't have any reason to worry that anything changed. You have a cheskes kashrus. The person who's usually doing it is not available. For sure you could use a woman. Could you use a cotton? It's a separate discussion. Cotton is different, even less than the woman in certain nemanuses. But even a cotton is neman for certain things. A cotton is neman to bring a chicken to the sheichet and to bring it back from the sheichet. A eved. If a cotton is there, I think you have to check in Tafel base. If it's before this man, you have to check. I don't remember. So a cotton is even less. But if you, and even if you don't have it, let's say you want to make it, it's a standard that the regular weeks you have a woman checking the Erev, it's not the end of the world. It's kosher. Because it has a cheskes kashrus. There's no isra cheskase. There's no chazaka faket. You're only confirming an existing chazaka, and it's biyad l'sakna because she could go call the Rav and tell him, I found this issue, I found that issue, as long as he knows what they're doing. So therefore it should be, l'chayre should be fine. What? Even a cheskes sister, yeah. She's not on herself, but they're raisa. A woman that's a nida is a schazik isura midiraisa, and she's neman to say tovla. She doesn't have to bring edim. Why is that? Because she'll be able to sakna. She could go into the mikveh and she'll be sakna it. So she's neman. If it's ain't be able to sakna, it's a problem. Same thing with nikur. Same thing with shchita. Hakol ksherim l'shchit. That's how the Shulchan Aruch starts. Afilu isha, afilu eved, whatever it says over there. Lo yischazik isura. And it's ein biyad l'sakna, and it's a deraisa, and it's le'avid of the gloye also. And tirchi. Yeah. A whole another discussion if it has a negias moment, but that's not relevant to the question of Erev or mikveh. It's only relevant to kashrus, and that's we discussed last year.
We don't say Erev is considered tirchi yisera? That's meaning telling the
Tirchi yisera is fixing it.
Telling the Rav is not tirchi.
No, it's not tirchi yisera. Pilot's not a tirchi yisera, so she's neman. That's a svara to say what she's neman. Yeah, and that is, with that I conclude, that was, we'll call it a bonus year in Nuchas Ceirovin, because I just remembered last week when we did the tour that I actually never spoke about the chiyuv of bdika. You went to see how to look at an Erev, and we never discussed in shiurim when is there an obligation to do it and who's neman to do this bdika. That depends. You have a chesk. If it was built and it was confirmed that it's kosher, and then it wasn't checked 1 week, and there was no reason to be chayshish for anything else, then l'chayr it's kosher. According to Dev Misharim, for sure it's kosher. Huh? Until the chazak is disbanded. But if you have storms, or if you have construction, or if you have the electricity lines are being changed, or anything of the sort, you have a problem. According to the way the Yesodi Yeshua understands the Harakamu, maybe it's a chiyuv. But even then, the Harakamu says Roy, it doesn't say it's a chiyuv.
Somebody give a share, I think it was good to give a share. It said that maximum times a month, or something, like you don't check it for a month, it's kosher after a month, it would be good.
Each place is different. That's policy questions. Each place is different. During snow season, it could be checked on a Thursday, and if it's a snowstorm Thursday night, you have to check it Friday again. If you have a big, a backup. When you have to check, you check the outer one always first. If you find a problem in one of them, you check the backup. Yeah, for sure. They have to. They should.
Even if you made a second one.
The backup is not there that you shouldn't have to check it. The backup is there that if comes out of Shabbos and you checked it and you see that there was a snowstorm which knocked off a whole street, the whole electricity on the whole street. So then instead of being right now sitting in the middle of a snowstorm over there digging and putting up poles and pulling strings, you'll go to your backup, which is 2 blocks over or a block over, and you'll just have to connect to that. You check, make sure that your backup is fine.
If there's a snowstorm, you can't carry on Shabbos.
No, that goes into the whole shayla. It's a machlokes if you have an Eruv that was good on Erev Shabbos, and that depends. That depends on what the Eruv was for. If the Eruv, what things would fall over there? If you're talking about it, you had an Eruv which is mostly walls, and you had pirtzes over there, and the pirtzes have solid poles. And the only issue that they have is that they had to put the string, and you worry that maybe the string fell. So on the Chayra, you could rely on it. That's what the Halakarmel discusses over there. The lechis are still standing. Ba'etzem that those lechis might have worked to block it off. You made it Tzorah Pesach because you wanted to make it Tzorah Pesach is better. So then, depends on what the Eruv is. If you know what your Eruv is, then you know what the issues are. If it falls on Shabbos, are you allowed to carry there or not?
What do you mean? Like, in other words, kosher the rice and just put them up on and you can
No. If it's kosher, even with the Rabban. If you could find a reason why it's kosher, also with the Rabban. No, we don't do kosher only with the rices. Stop carrying. If it's a snowstorm still, the chazakah doesn't get cancelled. You had a strong chazakah before. There are again, the chazakah is not, the cheskas isur doesn't happen until it's checked and it's found to be possible. Cheskas kashrus is checked and is found to be kosher. You have something which creates a suffix on the chazakah. The Eruv is kosher until you find...
Could be chashish the rice, especially if you have a tzorah.
Where? If you have, let's say you have a city, a big city, and you have mamash shusarabim is deraisa, and you have tzuras pesachs which are made with regular string, yeah. It came a snowstorm, the chances are it fell down. You should go check it before you carry, yeah.
If you don't, can't carry?
If you don't, it depends. It's machlokes haposkim. It's machlokes haposkim how to deal with it. Look, Halakarmel was there. Halakarmel says he explains why he could.
The Halakarmel case where you knew that it fell, no?
It knew that it fell, and he still says you could carry. Yeah. Look at Halakarmel.
But if you don't know it fell,
if you don't know that it fell, you have a chazakah.
Even though there's a snowstorm,
the snowstorm creates a shayla on the chazakah. And the chazakah is in place until you disprove it. So you're going to go now, you're going to send the guy to check it. That's what they do. Send the guy to check it and fix it. You're allowed to. There was a shayla we discussed. If you could have to tell a guy you should make a kesher shel kayama or not, that's a separate discussion. You could make a kesher shel kayama. But that's, because Shulchan Aruch I think says it's better he should not do a kesher shel Shulchan says it's better he should not do a kesher shel kayama. But otherwise you could do kesher. You could send a guy to check the places that are mod lepuranos and check them. And if you need to, they'll fix it right away. Electricity wires you can't fix. But electricity lines, you don't have one. You have a bunch of wires in the same pole. If a tree falls down, it knocks them all down, yeah. You'll find out if electricity is gone, then you know. If you're living on the border, if you're living on the border of the Eruv and electricity goes out in the middle of a snowstorm, in the other side, you have a chazakah until proven otherwise. But there are places where they have goyim, they're checking on Shabbos during snowstorms. If there's a snowstorm Friday night, they'll go check it Shabbos morning.
Even if it wasn't checked, and there's a
chazakah kashus, yeah.
Lost through the snowstorm, it'll still be allowed to use.
Yeah, on Shabbos. If it happened on Shabbos, not before Shabbos. If a snowstorm happened before Shabbos, it's Isra Cheskasa, you have a chiyuv to check it.
And if you don't check it, you can't carry it.
If you don't check it, it's a problem to carry, yeah. I'm not going to say someone's Mechal Shabbos, but it's a problem to carry it. That's one of the reasons that Rebbe writes in his letter why it's not recommended to do Eiruvin in cities, because people are not going to come to shul, they're not going to know, not allowed to carry. It doesn't talk about a snowstorm, it talks about, it's in the white booklet in the end, the English letter, I think the third or fourth reason that the Rebbe gives over there. It snows, first reason. Because people are not so connected with the Rabbanim, so there becomes an issue that they might not know about it. Seder. with that we conclude. There's other shiurim in Even Ezer, it's not going to be today.